Wow, what energy. Every year, there's a lot of energy, but this year, well, as Chris mentioned, and thank you for doing a great job, Chris. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. It is because of events like this and people like you that we can award student scholarships to the HRD program. I especially want to thank our sponsors. If it weren't for our sponsors, the annual networking reception would not be possible. It simply wouldn't produce the results it has for the last several years. I would like to thank the team of graduate assistants who have worked all year to plan tonight's event. And finally, a special thank you to Gina Sorgini and Bridget Boston for their hard work and dedication to the ANR and to the HRD program. It's been an exciting year for HRD, as you could tell from what Chris just said. And this is our 34th year of being in business. Next year, in 2015, we will be celebrating the 35th anniversary of HRD and the 30th anniversary of Villanova's graduate student chapter, which has won probably a record number of the Superior Merit Awards, which we decorate our office headquarters with. So what I'm suggesting is mark your calendar for Tuesday, March 24th. That's just about exactly a year from now. And you'll be informed between now and then. But hold a date because we know you're all busy. This year, 2 of our promising students received competitively awarded scholarships from local SHRM chapters. Chris, want to stand up? And Brittany, you're right there. You two stand up. From Greater Valley Forge chapter, and Brittany won the award from the Chester County chapter, both of whom are helping support this event tonight. During the past year, many of our students were involved in research supervised by their professors, and the students who published or presented as co-authors on such topics as innovation, workplace violence, and the experience of LGBT people in the workplace included, and you can pop up as I read your names, Lucy Oley, Lindsay Rock, Brittany Miskey, Megan Bosler, Noelle Withelder, and Cheryl Work. Villanova's HRD transitioned into a global program over the past couple of years was prompted by a combination of events. One was the move to the UK by our longtime advisory board member, Mark Servadidio. And I had just heard from him today, and he congratulates us. I said, we're doing well, we're doing really well. But if you get to fly back supersonic, that would be wonderful. We were contacted by the State Department and asked to meet with the delegation from the Mekong Valley in South Asia to discuss HR education. And you know where the other place they wanted to go in the whole of the United States? They wanted to see us, and they wanted to meet with people at Penn. So it's a concentration of something in this area. We then created a separate global advisory board, and we became an affiliate of the International Employers Forum. So all those things have helped propel us along to being a program that's really interested and on top of the topics of tonight's discussion. Now, tonight's program will be moderated by Celia Joseph, Esquire. Celia is of counsel in the Philadelphia office of Fisher and Phillips, which isn't too far from our location at present. It's a law firm that represents employers nationally on legal matters affecting the workplace. She is a member of the firm's International Employment Practice Group, as well as its Affirmative Action and Government Contractor Practice Group. She has U.S. and international employment law experience, including harassment and discrimination prevention, employment law, and corporate compliance training. employment policies and procedures, investigations, diversity and affirmative action, and more. Ms. Joseph is a co-author of the PBI, Pennsylvania Employment Law Desk Book. She's a summa cum, she's going to blush at this, I'm sure. She's summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa graduate at Temple University. She received her law degree cum laude from Temple University School of Law, and an MBA summa cum laude from Drexel University's LeBeau School of Business. She's a member of the Board of Directors of Phyllis Sherm and a member of the International Bar Association's Discrimination Law Committee. She's been a friend of Villanova's HRD program since her time as a member of the HRD department at Roman Haas Company, where many of our best graduates served their internships in the early years of their careers, including General George Schwartz, who contacted us because he was unable to make it here. Melanie Stefano, who now resides in Sweden. Govi Rao, who may be here, but is probably on business flying across the Atlantic. And Dave Nosek, who I know just came home from his job in Delaware. Please welcome Celia Joseph back to Villanova.
Thank you enough for being here today. And David took the words out of my mouth in terms of my involvement with Villanova University HR Master's Program. I was at Roman Haas for over 25 years, and I got to know about Dr. Bush and the program through the wonderful students who interned there. I used to teach employment law here from time to time, and then I got to work with these wonderful professionals. So it is, I mean it from the bottom of my heart, an honor to be here with all of you, Dr. Bush and Dr. Sawyer, and all of the people that helped put the program together, Chris and Noel and others. So just first, let's start with a little bit the thing we're going to do here today. What we're going to do, and we want this to be fun, we want you to be involved. Are we taping? I have a question, okay? I just want everybody to know we're taping. I'm sorry, it's a lawyer again. It's a lawyer. So that when you ask questions, you know that you're being taped and so forth, and if you don't want to be taped, answer questions, don't ask them. So that, that is important. But what we want to do is we have these incredible professionals here who are going to tell you about themselves. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. And together, all of us, along with Dr. Bush, Katina, and others, put together a soap opera. Okay, we're going to have a little soap opera tonight, and it's going to go through the life of an expatriate, and with it, we're going to have information and questions shared, and we want questions to be asked from the audience. We'll do that. And the one thing that Dr. Sawyer's students have kept on bringing home to us when we were working on this is that we had such a good time. We all met, we had dinner, we had such a great time. But we have to keep on remembering we're here to help give information to those who are going to be, who are HR leaders, who are going to be HR leaders in the future, especially those who are interested in international employment and HR practice and maybe even law. And so with that, we want to keep on bringing that information to you and making sure that you're learning from this. So without further ado, I'm going to just briefly introduce each of the panelists, and I'm going to give them a chance to tell you something about themselves. We have Charity Hughes, who is the HR Director, U.S. and Canada, SCA Americas. And I have to tell you that Charity, along with Will, three of us are on the Board of Directors of Philadelphia Sherman, so we're great friends. That's a Charity. Thank you. We're here tonight, Will Farkouh, who is SDHR Director, Human Resources Advisor for Global Manufacturing, who is just going to be starting an incredibly exciting global job, I'm sure I'll tell you about. Will, thank you for being here. Jennifer Lee, Global Mobility Manager, Sigma Corporation. We've worked with each other in the past, and she'll tell you about herself. And Luis Buentello, who's Executive VP HR, Panasonic Latin Americas, who I understand had got your degree online through Villanova and flew here from Nashville.
Yes.
To be here with us, and actually flew up before to even practice with us and work through So I thank you both. And as David said, I'm from Fisher & Phillips. I'm an employment lawyer and also a former HR professional EDO manager for a large chemical company. So let me first start with Jennifer. I have each of the panelists give a few minutes to tell you about themselves. Jennifer?
Okay, great. Thanks, Celia. So thank you first and foremost for the opportunity of inviting me to share a little bit about myself and share a little bit about my experiences. So I joined Cigna about a year ago, just under a year, to oversee the Global Mobility Program. Cigna is predominantly a domestic company, but it's undergoing a global growth model. And in that, they're looking at providing a lot of mobility opportunities to its employees and really looking at an alignment with talent strategies to the mobility opportunities. So it's a really wonderful chance for me to help build out that practice. Prior to joining Cigna, I worked at Goldman Sachs, where I lived in Tokyo and Hong Kong, and a similar role where I had management for global mobility. And then from there, I worked at a pharmaceutical, Bristol Myers Squibb, for a few years. And then my primary background is not actually in HR, as I speak for the SHRM, but I'm actually an accountant. So I came from an expatriate tax background at Ernst & Young first. So there's my very brief background.
Thank you. Very impressive.
Okay, well, thanks to everybody, especially the group that invited me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of everybody and get to talk to you. From a global standpoint, I've worked in Mexico for a little over 4 years, seen it in various stages of it's very secure, things are going great, to it's an extremely dangerous place as it is right now. After that, I was involved in working in China, starting up three operations there, including staffing, local staffing, and also expat staffing. And because we were a smaller firm at that time, you used your talent wisely and efficiently. And so I was involved in government relations, working with agencies in China, signing leases on behalf of the company. And it was a very, probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. I'm extremely proud of the HR staff I was able to develop in China. They're still very close to me. We established, I think, lifelong friendships, and it was really good to see how they developed. I've also worked in Canada. We have a company there that we purchased, and in every country that I've been in, I can honestly say that what you learn in one country doesn't always transfer very well to another country. And in Canada, what I found out there is that provincial law supersedes federal or any national law, and especially when we had operations in Quebec and then in British Columbia. So it was a very good learning experience. Still doing a lot of work in those countries, and I still enjoy it, and I'm happy to be here to share what I know about working someplace else other than the U.S. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to start, like the other panelists, by just thanking everyone involved in tonight's program. So certainly thank Villanova SHRM, Villanova graduate programs, and everyone, the faculty, the staff, everyone that's been involved. So also my fellow panelists who are so esteemed, as well as Celia, our moderator. So just a little background about myself. I actually started with an international IT consulting firm a few years back, and that was my first experience really working for an international company. And believe it or not, when you work for an international company, the very first thing that you struggle with is the most logistical thing imaginable, and that's just time zones. When you're trying to schedule a meeting and everyone's in a different time zone, that's probably your A, B, and C of working for an international or global company. After that, I've been working with my current role in my current company, which is SCA Americas. We're part of SCA Group, which is a global hygiene organization. We are actually based out of Stockholm, Sweden. and you'll see a little bit more about Stockholm later. So we're based out of Stockholm, Sweden. I was actually in the office today just thinking, who all do I work with? And I had to sit down and think about all the expats that I have in my office right now. And I have Sweden, France, Mexico, Germany, Norway, Chile, Brazil, England, and I'm working with colleagues all over the place right now. So time zones, languages, all of that, it's some fun stuff, to say the least, in HR. So I'm sure we'll get through a lot more of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Will.
Thanks, Sharon. Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Farkouh, and like the others, I really want to thank everyone for inviting me tonight, especially Katina for extending the invitation. It's been a pleasure working with everyone up to this event, and it's humbling to be sitting here for sure. So I have a fairly non-traditional HR background. Did my undergrad in hotel restaurant management. I was a chef for 5 years before I get into HR. It's really interesting to sit here 20 years later knowing that I've kind of made it in HR. So for those people that haven't started in that realm, I'm here to tell you that try being a chef and then going into HR. So I have both pens and knives in my office. But I've been in human resources for about 15 years. I've worked in a variety of different roles, all global in nature, primarily in talent acquisition, compensation, project management. And then in 2006, I was recruited to YF to recruit for our enabling functions out of our Collegeville office. And primarily, I was recruiting HR professionals. So as I look out into the crowd, if there's any people that I said no to, I apologize. So I'm happy to say that I'm still with YF. We were acquired by Pfizer a few years ago. It was a difficult transition, a lot of change management. I was fortunate through that change to survive this long. So I've been there about 8 years. And for the last 3.5 years, I actually stepped out of HR and worked in the business in an operations management capacity, supporting global manufacturing and our external supply business unit, which is long and short of it. So instead of making the drugs at a brick and mortar site, these were the drugs that we contracted out to a third party. So I was involved in communications, governance, implementing metrics, and a lot of talent management as well. So it was a phenomenal experience. And I did that with the goal to get back to HR. And when Katina approached me about this speaking opportunity, I said, why would you want a guy that's not in HR to be on this panel? And she said, just for that very reason, because you've done that stint in the business. And happy to say that I went back to HR in Pfizer 3.5 weeks ago. Really fresh. And I'm now Director of Human Resources for Global Manufacturing Emerging Markets. Have oversight for 19 sites, 3,500 employees. So I'm thrilled to be here. I have a very exciting position in front of me. And just a little bit academically, I got my master's in HR from Wieden University. I completed the Villanova Continuing Studies program not once, but twice. I loved it so much. Got my SPHR about a year ago. I also sit on the board of Philly Sherm. Again, I'm just thrilled to be here. So thank you.
Okay. I didn't realize that I couldn't see, so I'm going to just move over so you can see. So before we begin this program, I think I will, I'm the moderator, but I will be somewhat interspersing information. And you've heard about the exciting careers of each of these four panelists and how exciting it is to be in international HR. Just a quick background, I got into international HR employment law accidentally. New lawyer, Romanov's company, and the very first day they had me doing international employment law in Europe, talked about redundancies, didn't know what it was, and by the end of my career I was the global employment law UBO manager, and although most of my work, and I don't know if panelists will agree, was usually at 3 in the morning in my house, I did get to travel a lot, do things like spend a month doing harassment prevention training in 6 Asian countries, went all over the world, got to do all sorts of exciting things. And I'm mentioning this because each of the panelists talked about countries they've been involved in and background. In an hour and 15 minutes or so, we cannot tell you about every country in the world, every experience. So what we're going to do is give you a smattering of different types of issues and experiences that people consider, and then even some information specifically about countries. And then afterwards, we'll have a little reception and some dessert. You can talk to us even further. So without further ado, okay. I have to do it the right way. Yes,
To raise 1 foot.
Escape. Is that it? Okay, so this is As the World Turns with Samantha and Expatriate's story. It is a soap opera, and what we're going to do is go through the story and then ask for various questions of the panelists that we have prepared, and then we can intersperse as well. So, the first hypothetical, you said there's 5 hypotheticals. Samantha is a U.S. citizen hired directly from college to work in sales at Widgets Inc., a U.S. company, in its Bozeman, Montana headquarters. Samantha quickly shows she has high potential, and management sends her to Sweden at its Stockholm location for 6 months to learn about global management. So that is the beginning of our soap opera. So what I'm going to do is intersperse questions, and I'm going to start with Charity. No, spends a lot of time in Stockholm. And we're going to talk some about company policies and practices. So the first question, Charity, would be, how important of a role would you say cultural intelligence plays in helping to foster trust between expatriate leaders and their host country nationals?
I would say trust is probably the foundation of the relationship that you can build. You really can't go anywhere until you establish that trust. And that trust is really built off of credibility and really making sure that the folks that you're working with understand who you are, what you're bringing to the table, what credentials you have in a way that's non-threatening to them. So you've got to speak about your experience, what you've done, what you've been able to accomplish, and what you're hoping to accomplish in the current role in working with your partners. But at the same time, you've got to be non-threatening to them. You've got to come at it in a way that is culturally intelligent, that they feel as though they're going to learn through the process as well. And credibility is so important. I actually, not to put this out there like this, but I actually wrote an article for SHRM, and it was really about how do you build trust, particularly in the C-suite. And there's not much difference to what you do in the C-suite to what you do when you're working with global organizations. And that first part is really about curbing. It's about that credibility. That C represents credibility. And to build that credibility, you've got to be really honest about what you know as well as what you don't know. And that's the thing oftentimes when we're working in international assignments or we're working with people globally, we want to act like we know everything when we don't, particularly about their culture. Whether it's comments that we make that we think are smart or funny that may be off color to them and we don't know it, we've got to go into that relationship really with honesty to say, tell me about your culture, I'll tell you about mine, I'll tell you what I know, what I'm bringing in terms of skills and competencies, and start the relationship that way.
Charity, thank you. I know that the group here would like to learn more about how one gains knowledge. You give an example of how, if you want to start, how do you learn?
Well, we're sitting in a school right now, right? So I would say the first way you learn is really by education. I mean, that's it. And I say that facetiously. I know everybody doesn't want to go back to school, but education really is the foundation of everything. And if you don't want to go back to school, start looking through articles, start picking up magazines, pick up SHRM magazine, pick up whatever, and start to really read about that. And not just read about HR, but you really need to be a business partner. Start learning about the business that you're in. Like Will talked about, he went into operations. And if you really want to bring credibility more than HR, you've got to know your business. So bring the credibility of, I understand the business, I understand what we're talking about, I understand EBITDA, I understand all of those terms, and that's how you start to build your credibility in all honesty.
And Charity, thank you. Before we go to the other panelists, I want to mention to the group, Charity, would you like to share some of your, Charity does this great job, very, very high-powered, and yet, did you go back to school recently?
I am actually in school now pursuing my PhD.
And what is your PhD?
On leadership and emotional intelligence. So that is what the basis of my research is. And to be honest, when we talk about global organizations, it really is about cultural and emotional intelligence. The two are so linked, and it's really important when you talk about leaders, and we'll get to succession and so forth, but when you're really talking about global leaders, the only way a global leader is going to be successful is really through that emotional intelligence, knowing who they are and what they're doing and what they're bringing to the table, and being able to manage their own stuff with managing other people's stuff.
Charity, thank you. I want to open this up to the other panelists in terms of the same question about the role of cultural intelligence. Does anybody else want to address that?
The comment I would like to make on acquiring this cultural or bridging the gap that occurs in all cultures, especially as you're trying to integrate, is that for the HR professional, you need to think differently. You need to learn how to collaborate in the face of uncertainty. Be comfortable with ambiguity, with complex issues. Be patient. You will make mistakes. I think what Charity said is that you don't know it all. Don't assume that you do. And people will help you through the gaps if you can develop that trust. You got to teach yourself to learn differently, and that's seek out different experiences. If you stay in your comfort zone, I know people that we have transferred to other countries, and they act like they're in the U.S. From how they get to work to what they eat for lunch, and you have to break out of that. The small things are the things that people start to connect with you, and the rewards come from that. And you also finally have to act differently. Start sponsoring people or associate with people that are different from you. Look in your own offices. Look at the people that work for you. Look at the people that you're going to hire. We're so blessed to be in this country. We have this richness of diversity from all parts of the world that you can incorporate into your office and help you with those gaps that you're going to face when you're dealing with people in other countries. And I can't tell you how much that has benefited me from the staff that I have working for me.
Thank you.
I was going to say that for me, and having lived abroad, was stop focusing on the differences amongst each other and really focusing on the similarities. And some of the similarities is as simple as, let's go out for dinner because that's what we like to do, to the common goal. We need to make X amount in revenue. We need to reach this business need. So I would say that really understanding the foundation of one another and not focusing on creating gaps in the differences and reconciling that makes a big difference in how we work globally.
That is a great comment. And Will, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just a common thread. When we talk about trust, it's at the end of the day, it's about building relationships with people. People are people. So when you do get to work with them, whether it be an expat assignment or otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of time together, maybe not personally, but over the phone and virtually. So make it a point to get to know about that person, like maybe not delve into their personal life right away, but at least just get to know something about them. And 9 times out of 10, wherever they are in the world, you are going to have a link with that person, whether it be children or hobbies or pets or something. And just that little nugget helps build that trust. Trust isn't built based on how much you know, but just how you relate with people. So it's just a common thread to put a lot of emphasis on the relationship building.
Thank you. Does anyone from the group want to add any work with people from all over the world, even when you're here? The Sierra Center, Philadelphia. And so we talked about expats because Samantha is an expat. Are people familiar with the word impatriot or impat? An impat is basically someone from another country that comes here. So Charity, how would those experiencing the impatriot side of globalization create good policies and procedures for those who are coming from other countries here to the U.S. to work?
I would say first and foremost, we all know that the U.S. is a very litigious, sorry Celia, litigious society, and we are governed by a lot of employment laws. One of the things that we do is we actually, and it's not just those coming from other countries, it's actually all of our managers, we put them through a program, Putting Law to Work, and it's very fundamental. It's about how do you understand what you can and can't do, what you should and shouldn't do as a manager working with people. But we specifically focus focus on it for those that are impatriots to help them understand, because this is completely different, and what they're allowed to do in other countries, what they're allowed to say, how they're allowed to behave is completely different. So that's one thing. We actually put them through some really good training. Another thing that we do is we like to assign mentors to them and really help them through the way and kind of guide them. And to your point earlier, I think when you assign a mentor, that's someone that you can connect with quickly to help you get through some of those cultural nuances. So that certainly helps as well. But it can be a huge challenge. It can be a huge challenge. And I think training is a lot of it. And then to Will's point, it's relationship. It's getting down, spending time with them. As the HR person, it's good for you to spend some quality time with those people that are coming over here, those impatriots. Schedule regular time with them. Get to know what's going on. What are their questions? What are they struggling with? Because oftentimes, initially, it's the legal things, but at the end of the day, it's really the relationship issues that they're having. It's how do I manage?
So I would say I have a comment. Similar to what Charity had shared, I also think expectation management is key right off on the onset. So part of the impatriot and expatriate process is really having that orientation to anticipate concerns for the individual. What will be the schooling situation when you go to Hong Kong? What will be the credit issue coming into the U.S. as a foreign national? So the conversations we have become very personal very quickly. And it's because we really try to assess what are the needs and then anticipate the questions and concerns that they'll face as a result of their assignments.
Jennifer, thank you. Any other comments from the one thing that I just want to mention when you talk about relationships from the very beginning, an experience I had.
You acknowledge who they are as a person, their family, ask all the social questions, and then you do business. Anything else, it's going to appear as rude.
Thank you. Now, we are in our Samantha story, and Samantha has just started with the company. She just finished college. And if she is going to be going abroad or be chosen, I'm wondering, I'm going to ask, and I'll start again with Charity, then we can go around. Can you provide best practices on choosing employees to be offered international assignments to begin with? And then how do you create a succession plan?
So I would say first and foremost, it should be linked to the business strategy.
And what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, first and foremost, it is what is the business trying to do? Is the business trying to grow in a particular market or industry? And that's where you need to start. So even though we like to think it's about the individual, everything needs to start with the strategy because it is a business. So if the strategy is to grow in the Americas market, then who needs to be in the Americas market because of their skill set and what's going to help us grow there? So there's a twofold thing going on. It's the employees that may want to pursue assignments, but ultimately in terms of the organization, it's where are we going to benefit from bringing someone or taking someone. So it really needs to start with the strategy. That's first and foremost. And if it starts with the strategy, it's a lot easier to define who's your high potential and what's going to be the succession plan, because it's all going to be linked to the initial strategy that you've developed. So I would say with that, start to, again, learn your organization, learn your business. Where are we trying to grow? Or where do we need some additional support because we're already there, but for some reason we're taking a back step in the market. We've lost market share or something of that nature, and we need this type of talent in that type of environment. So that's where it really starts. And then in terms of identifying your high potential, after you get to the strategy, it's who's open to change, who's adaptable, who's flexible, because it's going to be really hard to send someone to another place if they're not someone who's very adaptable.
And how do you judge that?
It depends on how long they've been with the organization, because if they've been with an organization any length of time, you've got some experience in terms of their performance, because every organization right now is in the midst of change. Everybody is changing. I mean, change is changing at a rapid pace. So I would say first and foremost, if they've been with your company for some time, you probably have an idea if they're accustomed to change, if they know how to adapt and deal with change well. If they haven't been with your company for a long period of time, that's when you need to talk to them about what change have you experienced over your career. How did you respond to it? What things helped you? What things triggered some negative behaviors in you? And you start to have those conversations.
Charity, thank you very much. Anyone else in the group want to respond to that?
I think this is one of the most difficult questions, partly because in this field, this is one of the areas where there's a big gap. And it's because taking the time to understand enough of the business strategies and needs and aligning that with the talent and the pool of talent that you actually have that's viable for an assignment, and reconciling that to the cost it's all balls all up in the air that we're constantly juggling. I know for Cigna specifically, we've been really working hard on understanding what we call the strategic workforce segmentation, which really just understands for every role that we have, what would be critical, what is considered core, who are the specialists, and understanding that, we're identifying the appropriate mobility opportunities for these individuals. And I would also ask for us to really ask the questions to the business, what are the intentions? Is the intention to develop this individual and therefore we want to give this stretch assignment? Or is the intention of this is, a compliance need? We need a country manager to actually facilitate business growth, because that's going to drive the different types of support you get from the business and from the company. So we can be really cost effective. We can be very, very strategic in the way we deliver our model based on how we understand the roles. And I think that is a very difficult and complex effort, but we need to put the time in it.
And Jennifer, saying that, and just for everyone here in the audience, it sounds like there would be committees that would do that. Is it a committee? Is it one group? How is that, just briefly, how would that be done?
Yeah, so I would say it's, committee is probably work streams, and that involves talent management. We have career architectures that we have to really allocate roles to and really structure ourselves to. And then, the involvement of mobility when it's necessary.
Anyone else before I go to the next question?
Yeah, I just want to add with regard to the best practice. Let me describe the worst practice. It's, who do you have left that nobody wants? Can people relate to that one? I worked for one company that's what they did. They went around. We were building these large refineries, and their best talent, their top performers, were not going to go. They were going to send people that nobody wanted. And there was a lot of work that we had to do after that because of the damage that's done. And you gotta think about the perception or the image that you're leaving in that country when you send your worst, and what they think of you then as a company, as a people, as an organization. Where I have been, where it's done right, is that we look at people with what I call a global mindset, and you don't have to send someone overseas to develop that or determine that. There are global assignments and projects in the corporate office, in the facility, where they're interacting with other people, and you can easily see how well they're doing that, and how well they've already established relationships with people in other countries, and it's a safer bet to go that way. And but unfortunately, I still run across companies that are sending what we have left, nobody wants, and here you go. So don't do that.
And it's interesting, the hypothetical, you have Samantha, who's very new, and she's going there. So it's a different model even than what we've heard. Will, do you have any advice on what steps organizations can take in order to build this culturally agile climate and workplace?
Yeah, so heard a lot about change, and change is constant, especially in the industry that I work in the pharmaceutical industry. Changes in payers, changes in FDA, patients, healthcare, loss of patent. For those of you familiar with Pfizer, we just had a pretty major announcement recently where we lost exclusivity on Celebrex. So we're going to lose about $2 billion in revenue. You find that out in about 60 seconds. Stock market for Pfizer, it stopped trading for 20 minutes that day. So things change on a dime. About 2 years ago, our CEO, Ian Reed, decided we're going to completely change the culture of the company. And we thought, well, go ahead, Ian. It's 55,000 employees, $60 billion in revenues, 56 countries. That's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be like a flavor of the month. So it's taken 2 years. And they implemented a program called Own It. And it's an acronym for those of you that like acronyms. So O is own the business. So they treat everyone, everywhere, every place, doesn't matter. You own a piece of the business. W is win in the marketplace. So we want to be number one. We don't want to be number two, and you got to be quick. So that's the W. I'm being tested here, and I'm on camera. N is my favorite. It's no jerks. Let's discuss behavior. I'm not going to tell you what the former adjective to jerks was, but it wasn't jerks. If you want to ask me during dessert, I'll tell you what it was. And the no jerks piece was very important because a lot of people in any place, whether it's a big company or otherwise, some people get taken advantage of. There's bullies. So if you see me fooling around with this coin, they developed these coins that were distributed 2 years ago. One side it says own it, the other side it says straight talk. And this coin gives every Pfizer employee license. So if you hear something, you see something that takes place in a meeting, and you're sensing corrosive behavior, you pull the coin out of your pocket, and I've even hear it over the phone where you're on a teleconference, and you'll hear the coin like hit the table, and someone will say, "Hey, wait a minute, you can't talk to charity that way. Let's be respectful of one another. Time out." And it's to put people in check. So at first we thought, really, coins? That's my license, but people carry them with them everywhere they go. Some people have even drilled holes in them and made necklaces out of them. And I've been stopped at airports because I've left it in my pocket, but it does work. It's remarkable. I is impact results. Obviously, we want to get results at the end of the day. And T is trust one another, and we've heard the common thread of trust. About a month ago, we have this annual Own It Day at Pfizer. It's a big deal. And I was in New York, and Ian Reed was speaking in front of a group, and again, he's the chief executive officer, and he had a quote here, and I just have it written here, so I want to read it. Culture is the unique attributes and behaviors which gives Pfizer competitive advantage. It's our culture that will differentiate us in the market. So he's not talking about strategy. Now, don't get me wrong, we do talk about strategy, but it's the culture that ultimately will differentiate us. Another piece that I want to share, when you talk about changing culture, we talked about trust. Did anybody attend the symposium last week? All right, good. So Steve Forbes was our keynote speaker. And I was fortunate to be in a Q&A with Mr. Forbes. He wanted me to call him Steve, and I said, "Okay, Mr. Forbes." And he said, some of the most formidable companies are gaining market share by improving trust. And you can only do that by changing the culture. So you're talking about a major CEO of a huge company and a thought leader like Steve Forbes, and they're talking about culture and trust. Again, not to say that strategy is less of, but it's not going to happen overnight, and it has to be a program which everyone can embrace. And in the Own It culture, it doesn't matter if you're in Jakarta or California or Australia or London, it works everywhere. So it has to be something that everyone can embrace.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to say that we have this long soap opera. We try to get through all of it, but even if we don't, the next question is so important to me that I'm going to ask everyone just to take about 2 minutes to address this. If any of you have lived as an expat or have had overseas assignments or trips, what can you share about what you've learned that can help expats, business visitors, students, and companies? And I'll start, Luis, with you.
Embrace the area that you're in. Embrace the culture that you're being sent to. Also network with other expats, but don't neglect the people you're working with in that home country. It can be a very rewarding experience. It can also be a very damaging experience if you don't acclimate as quickly as possible. There's a lot of things that you can do, but one of the things I stress to people is get involved in something outside of work that puts you involved with the community in some form or fashion. Whether it's a volunteer, program, whether it's a community assistance or something, or whether it's teaching English, or you'd be surprised how many opportunities there are for U.S. people in other countries. And that interaction helps you to get over the rough spots, to get over the time when you realize, well, you're not in Kansas anymore and things are different. And you'll come out of it. Be prepared for those low times when you realize you're not in Kansas, but you'll come out of it if you persevere and you're involved. You get involved outside of work.
Give an example of something that
Well,
you did.
I am bilingual. I speak Spanish, but I wasn't born in Mexico. I didn't never lived there, and I get sent there. I learned the language from my parents, and I had to acclimate. I had to understand. I'm very punctual. My staff in Mexico is not. And they don't sneak into an office. They're high-fiving everybody and talking about, and it was an annoyance. It was something that really bothers me. My wife's laughing. She's in the back because she knows how I am about being on time. But what I did, is you start to make these mental judgments. Okay, well, if they're not on time, they're not serious. They're, and you got to get out of that. You got to get back into, okay, you're still observing, you're still understanding. But one of the things that I learned, they don't leave early either. How the workday is defined by when they finish what they're doing. And the social aspect of it was important to them. And they're not going to come into a room and not recognize you or talk about, what did you do this weekend or whatever. But everything you had on the agenda will get done. But you're not going to go home at 4:30. It may be 5:30, maybe 6:30, maybe 7. It's okay. It's so time is different. How we look at time and then how they did, and it was it was something I had to learn. It was something that I got to back out of this, understand this, and but you learn it also through close friendships that you develop with your staff and other people that say you get used to it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Everything you want to get done will happen. So.
Elise, thank you. Jennifer, is there something you'd like to share?
Yeah, so living overseas, you go on an expat assignment, you have certain preconceived ideas. I would say that you don't look at the opportunity as a career, but really as a personal development. And really, I use this example because in my story is that when I first arrived, I kept comparing everything back to the U.S. When I went food shopping, I went in, and I remember very distinctly going to a grocery store and looking at apples. It was like $6. And I was thinking, I'm never going to eat fruits again. I can't afford it. So I remember saying, all right, I really want this apple, so I'll go out and purchase this, spend the $6. But I remember thinking, this is like, and I don't know if this is a term, but the Snow White of apples. It was perfect. It was red. It was not bruised. And it was the way an apple should taste. And one of the things I've learned was that the Japanese, and this is when I was in Tokyo, the Japanese took so much pride in the way they produced any and every product, whether it's engineering a car, developing their own traditional handicraft, to even agricultural, growing this apple that I was paying $6 for. It was going to be the best experience, and I really reconciled with myself on the expense versus realizing that I have an appreciation for their culture.
That's a great story. Thank you. Jared?
So I would say I have not been an expert. I have not lived in another country, but I've certainly traveled a lot. And I have to echo what Louise said, get out, learn the culture. So one of the things that I make a habit of doing when I travel is let me do some sightseeing. Let me go to whatever, interest the people that are there, whether it's the museums or whatever, it's the churches or whatever it may be, get to learn the culture, because through some of those experiences and through visiting some of those places, you learn a little bit about their culture. You learn a little bit about what things mean to them. So even if you are not actually living somewhere, experience the culture when you have an opportunity to travel and ask questions. I'll come back to the office and say, hey, I went to this place. Talk to me about it. Why is it so important? Why is this some place that you tell everyone to go? So don't just visit, but visit and then come back and show an interest. Ask some questions about it.
That is just super advice, and it sounds like if you can, try to spend an extra half day or a day or whatever to get all of that experience, and we'll end up with you. some thoughts?
No, I just want to echo what Charity said. I was fortunate enough to do some travel to Eastern Europe and Asia. Try to learn as much as you can too, not only while you're there, but before you go, so you don't go in with any assumptions. And more often than not, the people that are welcoming you, they love having you there. And you typically do get treated very well when you travel. So take advantage of it and enjoy it.
And I would like to add to what Will said. I always, whether I was going to Louisville, Kentucky, or Beijing, I always found that people were so welcoming. They meet me at the airport, they would take me to dinner, they would introduce me to families. Remember, when you have business visitors to come here, to the Philadelphia area, wherever you are, also invite them to your homes. Take them out to a cultural event. Bring them to, to Citizens Bank. Bring them to the Amish country. Bring them, I friends from Singapore, and I took them to the Amish country, and I took them to the shopping around there. I mean, you do that because it's synergistic, and it also helps with not just you, but the learning of your family. So that's all great advice. I'm going to try to get to second hypothetical. Samantha's assignment comes to an end, but she's now dating Darren, an employee to the Stockholm office. Samantha doesn't want to relocate to the U.S. unless Darren is transferred there and unless Widgets will ship her new high-end glass, art, and furniture collection to the U.S. Samantha explains to her manager that Widgets often transfers the wives and significant others of male employees. Does Widget want to transfer Darren? Suppose they don't. Can they force Samantha to relocate without Darren? What are the visa issues? Suppose Widgets wants to separate Samantha. Suppose she files a helpline complaint. Now, since we're going to try to get through hypotheticals, what I'm going to do is, ask the panelists just generally if you want to address any aspect of this, starting with Luis.
Okay, let's break this down because this is an interesting one. What's unfair here is that we have it written down and we knew about this. Typically, you get the call in the middle of the night and you got to give an answer. And let's start with what we have with and we're a subsidiary of Panasonic. We have two policies, and one is a short term. The other one is a long-term relocation. Samantha, in my opinion, would have been on a short term. You're going to go for 6 months. We're going to bring you back every 2 months. You don't have to sell your furniture or any of that stuff. We'll have a place for you to stay. And that would deal with the high-end glass art and furniture because that one I don't have any problem saying we're happy for you, but we're not going to help you.
You're saying you would have addressed that in the paper?
Yes,
we'll
up front.
£5 we're going to bring back.
Yeah, up front, you need to have that clear because a lot of the misunderstandings happen because they weren't discussed, and that one is pretty blatant. You ought to have a discussion. This is not a full relocation. You're going to go there for a total of 6 months. We're going to bring you back every couple of months, to make sure you're connected, and then it's over. And then there's a lot of times in HR, especially on the global side, you're managing expectations that come with people. And if you can manage those well, these problems don't happen. But when they do, you need to be able to address it. Now, when you get into Darren in the office romance, first let me say office romances are good. I met my wife 34 years ago in the office. And so you're not going to get me to say anything bad about an office romance.
I agree.
All right? So they're good. Get that out of the way, check the box.
I work with my husband, I agree.
Okay. But when you start dealing with this, you got to ask yourself some questions. Is Samantha a Swedish employee under their labor law? Is she a U.S. employee? We're not talking about her citizenship. Okay, you have to ask those questions and understand that. And you answer that question typically by assuming that the laws in the country that she's in apply to her as well. It's always a better assumption to make that one first than that they don't. Because I've been rudely awakened at night to find out the contrary, that those Swedish labor law will apply to anybody that's working in a Swedish company there. Okay, now, there's probably some ins and outs. There's probably some, you have to be employed for 6 months or something. There's all kinds of things. But don't pick up the phone to call the attorney yet. Do some investigative work and understand what's going on and try to resolve this issue with her and the expectations that you had set with her. The other part you need to know that in Europe, especially Sweden, there's EU directives, there's Swedish labor law, And cohabitation is more popular than marriage. So, and in the U.S., when we talk about relocation, we talk about we're talking about marriage. And in European countries, when we're trying to transfer someone over here and they're not married, I've had companies call me saying, well, what do we do? And I said, well, they are married, act like they are, don't make a big deal out of it because you're not going to win that argument. But how long do they have to live together before they're legally recognized? And now you have an issue. You have two employees. One wants to come back, or one is scheduled to come back. There's an office romance. Remember, we already discussed office romances are good, so don't go there. You can't bring that one up. All right. What I would tell you is that you have to have this discussion with Samantha about staying there. Do you have a position for Darren? Can you make it work? From the visa standpoint, if it's an intercompany transfer, an L1 can apply if that person has been employed for at least a year. There's other solutions that you can look at, but you need to establish that dialogue. You need to get involved in it. And HR is the only person or the only group that can do that, that's safe. Don't ignore it. It's your opportunity to solve a problem, to come to the table with a solution. And so I would start with the expectations, understand the relationship, not that I want to get into anything personal, but, Darren's an employee, do we have a position for him or not? And you got to help the organization come up with the right answer. I sit at the exec council and I hear other executives talking about people coming with a problem. They're really going to start talking really favorably when someone comes with a problem and options, solutions. So it's an opportunity for you to embrace it and figure out how you're going to deal with this one. There is a solution. There is one that's workable. And people on this panel may take a different view, but the high-end glass art and the furniture collection, no sympathy. I'll sympathy, but that's not part of the deal. It was understood. It's 6 months. It's not a full relocation.
Louise, thank you very much. I wanted to mention a few things. One, Louise's comment about coming with solutions when there is an issue. For those of you especially are still in school, maybe you haven't had your first job, remember always what Louise said, because that is throughout your career. If it is like, what do I do? Think about possible options and go in with that, and you will look more like a leader, so that's important. The second thing, and this is one that I was going to mention as somebody who's done employment law for years, and for all of the HR managers who've experienced this, the time to be thinking about all the issues about the high-end art, the length of her assignment, the visas, when she's coming back, and so forth, is before she goes. And so try as much as you can to lay all that out, whether it's an assignment letter, where some people like contracts, I prefer assignment letters, the issue about whether they're actually employees in Sweden. It's a surprise to many that even if somebody is an expat, they actually usually sign agreements in that country. And so even though there are these various conventions and treaties that say, well, maybe it's their home country that the law more pertains, generally, the labor tribunals of the countries where people sit, the minute they get there, they will say the law pertains to them. And so
But the home country law also pertains.
Right, the home country, so for that reason, does anyone here know why she was hired in Bozeman, Montana? Why? Why is that important? Why is that important? Because Montana is the only state, not territory, in the U.S. that does not have an employment at will. And that there is a probation period, and after the probation period, Charity knows you can only fire somebody for cause. And so I threw that in there to get into the issue is that people can be covered by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different countries. And so to make sure you understand that before you take any action, the managers take action. And so that is the big picture. So I'm going to move along just so we can find out what happens at the end. Well, Rainy Widget's response, Samantha and Darren get married. Widgets has an opportunity to create a new subsidiary in Japan. Widgets would like to send Samantha and Darren together to Japan for 2 to 3 years to help create the company there. And so with this, I'm going to start with Will. What is your advice to managers about leading? And we've heard in the comments comment from the audience about leading global teams to foster optimal collaboration now that we have people from different countries?
So, in a very, very matrixed global environment in pharmaceuticals, it's a way of life, the way we operate. So in terms of fostering collaboration, we've heard some of these comments already, is that everyone needs to be included. So even though they're not in the physical office with you, you want to make sure that you're remembering everyone on the team. Also need to embrace technology as much as possible. Try to utilize video conference, webcams, WebExes, file shares, SharePoints, what have you. So not only just talking to people on the phone, but it definitely changes the dynamic when you can see someone, even if just to see if they're not, make sure they're not multitasking and they're actually in the moment. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. But a manager once told me, like, when you're on a call, like, be present. Don't, because we can get distracted for so many different things. So utilizing a camera is critical. Also, and we've heard this already, be inclusive and be respectful of cultural differences, be respectful of holidays, be respectful of religious events, and also remember the time change that we talked about. So I never thought I'd use that app on the phone that gives you all the different areas of the world. Mine's like 23 countries long right now, so be mindful of all the various time zone differences, and you're not scheduling a call with somebody. For you it works out at 10 a.m. Meanwhile it's 12 a.m. or 6 p.m. or even on a Saturday. So you definitely have to be mindful of that. Was there a comment there?
Yeah. I just wanted to add one. You live in several different countries. What advice do you give about developing employees beyond learning about culture and instead growing as a true global leader?
Yeah, so I want to share another story. I already answered most of my questions. And it's really just relating to the fact that identifying that common ground. So when I first moved to Hong Kong, I reported into the Asia regional head, and he, had a team across the region, predominantly in Hong Kong and Singapore and Tokyo. And when I had my first one-on-one with him, his first question to me is, am I feeling safe? Am I making friends? He didn't ask whether or not I'm acclimating to that new environment. Am I understanding the Chinese culture as it is in Hong Kong? He didn't ask a single question about that. He really wanted to make sure that I felt, as a single woman in a new environment, that I was safe. And to him, that was a big priority, as well as a behavioral aspect of who he was. And he also wanted me to feel as if I could fit in. He wanted to make sure that I can feel at home in this new location. So to me, I feel that a true global leader really understands the team that goes beyond just culture. We really just identify with one's own behaviors as well as own competencies about oneself and what they deem as important, as a value. So, and then again, really understand what is that common goal and thread of pursuing stakeholder engagement and whatever it may be that drives the business and drives your responsibility. And so I would say that for me, a global leader really looks at everything from a much broader perspective than just looking at the culture. So that's my take.
Thank you. Anyone else from the group want to respond?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, how many people here have had a global assignment or frequently go to a foreign country? I'll take California as a foreign country. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments on that? One thing I do want to mention, just a quick comment about the fact that Samantha is a U.S. citizen, working for a U.S. company, first in Sweden and then in Japan, and just for everyone to understand that the U.S. federal anti-discrimination laws have a long arm, and that they protect U.S. employees working for multinational companies, even when they're in other countries. And so if Samantha is experiencing discrimination or harassment that could be under Title VII or AIDS Discrimination Act, she could, in any of those countries, bring a case in the U.S. as well as possibly in those countries as well. Question?
Following on with that, to raise an issue that I struggle with. We've been talking about the positives, the respect.
Of a culture, when that culture is really strong, then those values will start to permeate in every aspect of an organization. So to your point, one of the things that we have struggled with a lot is the whole age factor. I mean, that's huge for us. And particularly when it comes to recruiting, we always get resumes with age, marital status, children, all this on a resume and picture. And, you know, originally the recruiting staff at some point was just forwarding the resume. And I'm like, no. I know that's how they submitted it, but we've got to scrub it, take all that information off before we forward. But it becomes a cultural nuance. I mean, they don't realize that you can't do that. They don't realize coming from another country, if they are expatriates here, that no, you should not put that stuff on a resume, that we don't want to look at that. But it's a learning process, in all honesty.
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting you bring up a picture, because
You know what happens. Panelists, I'm going to ask them one last question, and then we can continue this really vibrant discussion over dessert. So I just have to let you know what happens at the end. They get sent to Japan, Samantha gets a first child, and then they ask them to leave, and I gotta tell you, the family does not apply extraterritorial. It only applies to people in the U.S. But usually in Japan, those family medical leave laws can pertain. There isn't actually, people get various leave. The money is usually for insurance. But some countries, depending on how long the person's there, the person may end up in that void of no leave under each country. So what many companies do is they have actually special family medical leave laws for expatriates. So that's that. And then the fifth idea, the idea comes at the end. Following the completion of Japan, they're transferred to Brazil, and even though she's had a great career, they really are having a hard time in Brazil. The language barrier, the local manager undermines her, and also because of the safety issues that occur in Brazil. It's very tough for her. They don't feel safe, so she wants to end the assignment early and return home. And there's no open positions. They don't want to lose her. And so I think just get to the final question with the group. That is a big issue in terms of keeping. Actually, let me ask if somebody would just want to respond. What happens at the end of an assignment when someone comes back and there's not a job, but you really appreciate the person? Any thoughts of what you would do?
Well, this is the area where the process really breaks down. The bringing back someone that has done everything that you've asked them to do in an overseas assignment, typically the job you have for them or the career path is poorly planned, is poorly thought out. And the majority, if there's all kinds of statistics on this, the majority of people when they return last maybe 1 year and they're gone. And all the experience that you, these high potentials and all the experience you gave them and their development goes to someone else. And the majority of the reason that that happens, and I've seen it, is that that person is not, for example, if it's a corporate setting, that person is not there. So relationships are being built with the talent pool that's there, and that person is hidden from it. Okay? And so no one thinks of that person. And no one thinks about that person's career path the way they are thinking of someone that they're interacting with daily, in and out. And so I would say from a U.S. perspective, this is the area that we can learn from our European neighbors that do a much better job of that, where there's commitments, here's what you're going to do. I think, and I'm generalizing here, on a whole, it is not well thought out, it's assumed, and you end up losing the talent that you just spent a lot of money developing.
I just want to add one thing. I think what companies need to do to make it more successful is think of it from a project management standpoint, because it really is a project. You've sent someone somewhere, and if you've done it the right way, as Louise said, and as I said earlier, if you thought about it from a strategic standpoint, there's a defined purpose why you're going over there and what it's going to do to help you when you get back individually, personally, and help the organization. Then you can plan it as a project. Then you can have periodic check-ins, milestones, all of those things that you do in a project, so when the person is done and ready to come back, we already know because we've talked about it and we've touched base so many times. So I would encourage anyone that's in an organization, think of it more like a project management perspective as opposed to thinking about it, I'm not going to think about it until the person's ready to come back 2 to 3 years from now. Make sure you're touching base with them on a regular basis.
And let's not let this be the final question, and I'd like Will and Jennifer, if you have advice on this.
They summed it up very well. At the end of the day, you don't want to be reactive to it. It's got to be a proactive process. But I think it's also incumbent upon the colleague as well, not to think that they're going to come back and get their old job put on in a nice package with a nice red bow. So that person needs to be continually networking as well. Kind of similar to what I went through. I mean, even though I was still in the same country and I didn't change countries, when I went on this assignment in the business, I always had an ear to the ground to find out when the next job was going to become available. So if anyone saw the movie Glenn Ross, Always Be Closing, it'll always be networking. So it's important whether you're inside the company, outside the company, it has to be inherent in our cloth. So something you have to do every day.
Great advice. Jennifer.
I would say, as an HR professional, I would challenge us to think broadly. You know, we here in this example, we're only examining whether or not she has a role in the U.S. You know, her husband's in Sweden. Do we even examine whether or not they want to consider going back to Sweden, going back to Japan? So we really should think about, you know, what home country might mean for an individual. So, you know, really be creative, really challenge ourselves to think outside of the box, especially when you have somebody as talented as Samantha.
Well, comment.
Yeah, oftentimes when organizations invest the resources for someone to go abroad, as the panelists already mentioned, that it should be a project plan, it's for development, and hopefully that development is to nurture a leader that's going to do wonders for the company long term. But in the fifth example here, where you said that there's a possibility that there's no home when they return, the other dynamic that can come into play is poor performance, or just not meeting the expectations when they were abroad. So I would love to hear the panelists' feedback on whether or not they've had that experience, because oftentimes some organizations, they plan for poor performance, but sometimes a leader can go elsewhere and expectations aren't met. But there's a learning experience there as well, and that may or may not be acceptable depending on which organization. So that might be worthwhile just talking to.
And I'm going to ask Dr. Bush, I know we're at the time. Do we have a few more minutes to continue this? Or no? 2 more minutes. I'm sorry, that's an excellent question. Also, I just want to make sure that we're not going to be talking about individual situations identifiable, but in a general sense, would the panel like to address this question?
A poor performer overseas. Be very careful of terminating someone in an overseas assignment. Unless you've investigated what that's going to cost you, and you still have some obligation to bring that person back. And again, that's managing the expectations. That should have been in their assignment letter. If it works, here's what's going to happen. If it doesn't work, here's what's going to happen, and how you're going to manage that, and everybody understands that. It should not be a surprise, and it certainly should never be a surprise to you what that cost is.
Anyone else on the team?
I would just say find out if the performance is poor just because it's a skill set issue, or if there are poor influences around that person. Oftentimes you can go somewhere or be in an environment where the environment is not conducive to your success. So I think part of it goes back to the root analysis, finding out why. It may not just be that they're a poor performer. It may be that someone is not coaching them, or they may not be perceived culturally in a good way, and other people are equating that to performance. So I think you've got to do some underlining investigation with that.
That's good advice. Will or Jennifer, any other comments? One more question? One more. Celia's in charge.
I just had a quick question. Have you guys ever really taken any credence into dimensional, basically, just measurements like Hofstede's measurements, like their dimensions? Is that like when you send people abroad and you're looking at different cultures, like you mentioned at one point in Mexico, that they're on a different time schedule. Is that something that would come up in one of those measurements, or do you just try not to look at it too much?
We use it, but don't let it overrule everything else you have at your disposal. Like the employee that's working with you and the opportunities you have to put them in a global setting without sending them overseas will tell you a lot, much more about how they interact. The problem I have with, they're used inappropriately sometimes. They're used as the pass-fail. Oh, you did well, you go. You didn't do well. There's other dimensions, there's other factors, there's other perspectives that need to be considered along with it. That's all.
So, and I would just want to say from a legal standpoint, both in the U.S. and elsewhere, I'm familiar with those tests. There may be some legal issues when you're having personality tests, how that can affect someone. And then if you're a federal contractor in the U.S. and this can affect someone's job, you could even get into the whole issue of whether you're using, or under the EEOC, whether you're using a test in an improper way. But so I think there's caution. And then I would say that the last thing before we close, and I am going to have each person just say one last statement, because I want them to say that, is the gentleman who asked about performance issue, just to make sure that whenever you have performance issues outside the U.S., especially an expat, third country national, do talk to the appropriate lawyer or lawyers, because of all of the laws that can apply and all of the severance and notice and the rules that are in other countries. So I will start, I guess, at the end. I'm going to give 1 minute to each, just a closing statement, what you would want this group to hear about
Closing statement.
managing.
This is one of the things I didn't prepare for. I was just kidding. No, I appreciate everybody's time today. And I would say that living overseas or even working as an international HR professional, it's been the most rewarding. And so I would highly recommend at one time in your life and career that you really consider it an opportunity overseas.
Thank you. Luis.
Yeah. I tell you, one of the things that I'm spending a lot of time on that I never thought I would is security. We have a dangerous situation with a lot of people that work for us in Mexico, and what are the plans to get them out? Or what do we do when the situation gets out of hand and where they're working, and how do we provide additional security? And that is becoming more and more an issue for us. I was looking at some research, and there's 6,000 U.S. expats in the Ukraine. Who's dealing with that? What's the third country or the safe country you're going to get them to if you have to get them out? Have you already made a decision to get the families out? I mean, all these kind of things and nobody suspected we would have a problem in the Ukraine a year ago. Venezuela, you look around, these things, they're flaring up, and people are caught there, and they're going to call you. The phone will ring, and you have to have it. So start thinking of those terms and start being prepared for it.
Thank you, Luis. Charity.
I would say to that security issue as well. I mean, it gets so bad to the point where we actually, for a lot of our executives, we order dual sets of business cards, one with their actual title and then one without a title, so that when they travel to certain countries, i.e. in Mexico, they don't have to necessarily share their title because there are some security issues. On another note, I would say, in terms of going back to the global question and kind of testing people out, the best way to test people is to put them on a global project where they don't have to travel yet. Give them that exposure, give them that experience. My first day on my current job was part of a project, and I walked into a room and I heard a good 5 different languages all at once. I heard people from Mexico, I had someone from Germany, I had people from Stockholm, I had people from the UK, I had all of these, and I turned around and looked like, what did I just walk into in the middle of Wisconsin? So I would say the best way to really get experience and to prepare yourself is just to work on a global team first and use that as an opportunity to learn the competencies you need to work globally, and then at some point think, do I actually want to work overseas somewhere?
Thank you, Charity. And Will.
Great advice. Tough going last. So I would just say don't be passive. Ask for the opportunity, even if it's 6 months or 12 months from now. Let your managers know. Let your mentors know. Let your network know that you're interested in getting involved with something globally, because you never know when an opportunity is going to pass your desk. And when it does pass by your manager's desk, he or she will not say, oh, Chris approached me a couple months ago, or Susan came to me a couple months ago, I'm going to call her or call him. So be proactive about it. But when the opportunity is given to you, take it.
Be ready.
Be ready. Yeah.
Well, that was a great closing. I want everyone to applaud. Here tonight and participating. We learned a lot and have dessert and some networking, and there's raffle at the end. So thank you very much.